1,000 members and sympathizers of the MEK.
Hi there.
This is my colleague, Ms. Azimfar.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, ma'am.
She normally lives in Paris. She's like the NCRI's representative to international organizations, and she works extensively with the UN system in Geneva.
Okay. Can I get your name spelled out or here?
Yes.
I'll let you do it.
So we have a list of names of 120,000 members and sympathizers of the MEK who have been executed in Iran in the past 39 years by the regime in Iran. And it has also lots of pictures. This is like a cutting from the pictures of the people here.
Yeah.
It's Elaheh, but you can call me Ellie if it's easier
Ellie?
for you.
Okay.
Yes.
And this picture you see here is the second one right here.
Is that your
That's
brother?
my own brother, yeah.
That's your brother.
So, obviously, these 120,000 people that were executed over the past 30-some years, they have lots of relatives, friends, neighbors, and it seems that from what we see in Iran today, that the younger generation of Iranians now are standing up for the sacrifice that was made by their parents and grandparents. So the MEK, although its leadership was forced to leave Iran in 1981, has always had a vast network inside the country, naturally clandestine, because if the regime were to know who they are, what they do, how they're organized, they would end up in prisons, tortured and executed, because according to Iran's Islamic Punishment Act, that's the penal code, a mere expression of sympathy for the
death
MEK,
penalty,
regardless of whether you have taken up arms or whatever, even peaceful activities, you're considered to be they call muharib, which means waging war on God, and of course the punishment for that is death. But more recently, over the past, let's say, 2-3 years, especially after the situation of MEK residents in Iraq was moving toward resolution, and they ultimately relocated to Albania in 2016, there has been, if you will, renewed emphasis and expanded work within Iran, in a sense forming what has come to be known as the centers of rebellion in every city. And in fact, now if you go on the Resistance's television channel, which broadcasts 24/7 into Iran, you will see a lot of people posting videos that say, Rebellion Center number 200, 250, 400, 895.
And that's how many centers there
More.
are. They're growing
They
every
actually,
day.
their slogan, and they call it like they say Ashraf 225, Ashraf 336, because this is a reference to Camp Ashraf, which was
1988,
the main
massacre.
camp, the main
In
camp,
Iraq.
the main camp in Iraq, that was the MEK, like 3,400 members of MEK were there. Then ultimately they relocated, and now they're in Albania. But Ashraf, in a sense, serves as a symbol of rebellion, and so these net cells inside Iran have named their outfits as Ashraf, like Ashraf 1, Ashraf 256, Ashraf 995, and the goal was to have 1,000 Ashrafs. It has now gone beyond that, as Mayor Giuliani yesterday said, and that's why I needed that book to show you. In every major city, or even a small town, that you saw people engaging in protests in December, January, you have had dozens of MEK members and sympathizers executed by the regime in the years past. So clearly, it seems that like a phoenix has arisen from her own ashes, And so, in a sense, those who were killed did not die in vain, that there are this new generation that has basically followed in their footsteps. And so we believe that the movement that will bring down this regime needs to be organized. An anticipation that somehow you will have some spontaneous, if you will, organic.
I was going to say, it's my understanding, and I've talked with several exiled Iranians in California about this, as well as government officials, diplomats, that this has really been an organic, like a Tea Party-like movement, where people just didn't say that we're following one leader necessarily. We're all speaking out, and it's in big cities and small villages. They all just kind of decided that enough was enough, and they now are saying, obviously they need to be more organized to take it to the next level. Hence, this is what you guys are doing. So, in that spirit, what I need to kind of say is to tell the television viewers here. I mean, it needs to be kind of simple, and I don't want to mention in the broadcast or the story about the Muslim Brotherhood, but how can you explain to me how you're going to organize and take over the government, and then continue running it, because obviously there are military bases and there are power stations that all need to be running still, and the regime would most likely try to cut that off, or they would booby trap it or whatnot. So without divulging, I guess, intelligence on your behalf, how are you going to go about that?
Well, I maybe I should, before specifically answering you, I should say that this notion that what you saw in Iran in December and January was spontaneous and was leaderless, this notion that is not consistent both with the history of the past 30-some years, but also with the facts on the ground. Why? Because remember 2009,
the Green
after
Party,
the election, when tens of thousands of people marched in the streets of Iran, in Tehran especially, and they said, "Where is my vote?" And it took several months, 6 months actually, from June of 2009 until December of 2009, for the protests to change its slogan from "Where is my vote?" to "Death to Khamenei." In fast forward 2017, December, when the protests began in Mashhad over high prices, actually price of eggs and chicken, it took 2 hours for the protest to become "Death to Khamenei," "Death to Rouhani." And interestingly, the Friday prayer leader of Mashhad, who was a senior mullah, said, "How was it that this demonstration by our beloved people over high prices all of a sudden was taken over by some group and the slogans changed?" So that's one indication. The second indication is that if you go and check all of the slogans in the 142 cities, and by the way, of those cities, more than 100 had population of more than 200,000, you will see virtually every same slogan. Moderates, hardliners, the game is not over. Death to Khamenei, death to Rouhani. We want a republic. We don't want an Islamic republic. We want a republic. We want independence, freedom.
Syria, Lebanon.
Syria, no, leave Syria alone, think of us. Neither Gaza nor Lebanon, I give my life only for Iran. There were uniform slogans. More than that, obviously the underlying cause of the protest was the economic situation, the hardships that people are feeling.
And the banking system, when the money went back, they went to go get their money and it was gone.
Yes. But unlike, like, for example, you saw in Baltimore or in Jefferson or in Watts in Los Angeles, not even a single piece of private property was attacked by the protesters.
Yeah.
They were very targeted, attacked the headquarters of the Basij, the paramilitary Basij. 60 homes of Friday prayer leaders were attacked.
Representatives of Khomeini.
Yes. Governor offices were attacked. Government centers were attacked. These were all directed and guided by what you call the centers of rebellion. And so in this sense, the December 2017, January 2018 uprising did have leadership, did have guidance, did have direction, and it's the result of the work that the MEK had put in for 2-3 years, very quietly, basically organizing, working with people within Iran. And naturally, now in this day and age, obviously, internet was very effective, various apps, messaging apps, and things like that. So that said, now getting back to your question.
Can I just chime in? Was the October 29th protest, was that like reassuring for the people inside MEK, saying that, look, wow, we had all these people on October 29 come out, break down barriers to get to the, even though police and said no, they tried to block all the people from going. I watched the footage and I thought it was incredible, where, I mean, they were saying go away, and all of a sudden just masses just diverged onto, and I mean,
and I think also that if you will, the wall of fear in Iran is beginning to crack. One of the most interesting slogans was, initially when the uprising in December began, people were chanting, have no fear, we're all together. After maybe a couple of weeks, it turned into have fear, pointing to the regime officials,
Because
we are all together.
Yeah.
So that is, we don't fear you anymore. And then you have seen this trend where a lot of the members of the Basij and the security forces burned their membership cards, and they posted YouTubes on YouTube. And so in this sense, obviously, as to the exact, if you will, tactics or methods by which the regime will be overthrown, obviously remains to be seen. Some of it we obviously cannot be divulged, some of it we don't know. But the fact is that given that the underlying causes of the uprising, namely economic hardship, mismanagement, endemic corruption, will not be solved, will not be resolved, that this uprising, as Congressman Rora Barker said a couple of days ago to reporters, is just beneath the surface. Despite its ebbs and flows, it's going to erupt again. And I think that the people who took part in the protests in December and January, I think they have also learned a great deal from that experience. These centers of rebellion have become better organized, have grown in numbers in terms of their members. So when push comes to shove, I think that the tide of the uprising will overcome the repressive apparatus of the regime. Remember, at the time of the Shah, a lot of people said the regime of the Shah has the strongest army in the whole of the Middle East, yet largely unarmed citizens succeeded in overpowering the military forces and taking over the country. So in this sense, again, more important than being concerned about how exactly that will happen, we have to understand that it will happen. Now, as to what form it will take remains to be seen, and I think that even within the regime's repressive forces, at least at the lower levels, not the top brass, lower levels, these are like people in the neighborhoods. They know each other, especially in the small cities. So once they sense that the balance of power is shifting, that this regime is really on its way out, that they're not going to open fire on their sisters and brothers and fellow neighbors or fellow next door neighbors.
Yeah, and I've seen those videos and they're very compelling, and that's usually indicative of change that's coming because they know that they don't want to be on the wrong side of history,
Yes.
as we talked about yesterday. So you think that there's enough people inside the government that will continue running the government then? And do you think, I mean, how do you think that's...
You mean after the fall of the
Yeah,
regime?
after the fall of the regime.
Well, you know that, and I think Mayor Giuliani also mentioned it, you know, Iranian society is a very robust society. Iranians are highly educated.
Yes.
There are a lot of university graduates now who are unemployed with a lot of expertise. In fact, I remember one video where a guy had gone to become a waiter at a restaurant, and the restaurant owner asked him, "What is your qualification?" He said, "I have a master's degree in such and such field." And so I don't think that would be a problem in terms of, let's say, if tomorrow...
There would be a little bit of chaos, kind of like when President Trump took over in this country. We had a bit of chaos, but we kind of ended up out of it, yeah.
The NCRI, which is a coalition that brings together 5 different organizations and from 550 members, many of whom are distinguished Iranian political personalities, academics, scientists, has 25 committees that will be acting as the de facto ministries. And so let's say if tomorrow, just for the sake of argument, this regime falls and NCRI replaces it, there will be a provisional government for 6 months. And the main task of this provisional government is to hold free and fair elections for a national legislative constituent assembly. Remember also, Kim, that this argument that if this regime is toppled, that there's a possibility of a scenario that you saw in Libya or you have seen in Syria or Egypt or elsewhere, that scenario is not going to happen in Iran. Do you know? For a very simple reason. The very source of chaos in Syria, in Libya, to some extent Egypt, were the fundamentalist groups, the bad guys, if you will.
Yeah.
And of course, Iranian's regime fomented sectarianism in Syria, in Iraq, and to some extent in Libya. But when it comes to Iran, if you remove the very source of extremism and sectarianism, then you're home free. In other words, the bad guys are already in power in Iran. They have been for 39 years. As Mayor Giuliani said, there's nothing worse than the current regime in Iran imaginable coming after, especially since you have an organized opposition. Why do you think the regime is so fearful of the MEK? Why does Rouhani invest a lot of capital, calls the French president to say, we want you to crack down on Mariam Rajavi in Paris? Why does Khamenei, after 13-day silence, says that there was a triangle? One side was America and the Zionists, the other side was this rich Gulf country, meaning Saudi Arabia, and the third side, the internal side, was the MEK. Why does he say that? And every single Friday prayer leader in Iran said this was the work of the MEK. The commander of the Revolutionary Guard said the same. His deputy said the same. He said, we arrested a lot of women in the west of Iran. They had gone there from the north of Iran. And these are the people that we were after, going back to the early 1980s, meaning they were sympathizers of the MEK. So in this sense, I think this notion that if this regime falls, there will be chaos and things like that, is untenable. And I think the history of Iran has shown that that is not the case, even at the time of the Shah. When the Shah fell, you didn't have an organized opposition when the Shah fell. I know this because I was involved in the anti-Shah movement in the 70s. Yet you didn't see the type of chaos and sectarianism and the killings that you see in Syria or in Iraq or in Libya. Iran is a very different country, very different country than those countries are. But more importantly, you have an organized movement that is well recognized, that has support within the country, that has a specific platform for the future, that has a recognized leader, her face is recognized. You may be surprised to know how many television programs the regime produces trying to vilify the NCRI and Mrs. Rajabi and the
I'm
UK.
sure
and a lot of publications they put out.
Yeah.
Yet, despite, remember, everyone who took part in these protests in Iran, they were either not born at the time of the revolution or they were kids. So they were under constant propaganda and bombardment and brainwashing of this regime about our movement. Yet, that hasn't affected them. Yet they support us. I can give you an example. I was in Paris a couple of weeks ago, and I met this young couple who just come from Iran. And the wife, who's very young, I think in her 30s, told me that when she was growing up in Iran, she used to watch television in Iran, and she said there was this serial she was watching that showed that MEK is killing people left and right, and then when about to be captured, they would take their cyanide pill. And she said, when I kept watching this, I developed this terrible fear of the MEK, that how vicious they are. Then she said, as I grew up, I said, why don't I go and do a little bit of research, Google, see what's going on. And she said that after I went and I read a few things, I realized that the exact opposite was true. That it is the regime that kills a lot of people. And the real villains is not the MEK, but is the regime in Iran. And so now I hate the mullahs for deceiving us. And I have come to become a sympathizer of the MEK. You see?
Let me ask you this. I mean, would you say that the MEK and Iran in general are natural allies with the West? I mean, do you see them as natural allies? I mean, right now, and I've written a few stories about it, where President Bush labeled Iranians the axis of evil, and in one of my commentaries, I said that well, what better way to get rid of the axis of evil than make it an ally? And I think that Iranians are a natural ally for Americans, and I think that young people, especially, they see it as well. And they see, look, we just want to live our lives and get married and take our kids to soccer games and do all these normal things. But it seems to me that more so than, Saudi Arabia, and maybe that's why Saudi Arabia is making all their change, I think it's because they see what's going on in Iran, and they're trying to, they want to be the leader in the region. But I think if you guys are successful in taking over, I think that Iran will be the dominant democracy in the region. I think they could even overcome Israel personally, but that I just think that I'm wondering if that's what you guys feel as well, that America is a natural ally for you.
We have seen many Western politicians who support our pro-democracy movement in Iran. They have always said that, look, this opposition movement is the best ally for the West to get rid of this regime. And I think if you look at the 10-point plan of Mariam Rajabi for future Iran, you could see that, yes, the future Iran will be a natural ally for any democratic system, wherever it is, around the world. I mean, this is something that we have kept saying for ages. And I think it is, when you look at this, it becomes very, very natural and obvious that it will be.
I'm a supporter, so yes. I follow her
of
Twitter.
Of course, Iran will have its own culture, it will have its own way of life.
As it should.
Will have
as it should.
Own way of even running the country.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is how it is.
Yeah.
This is how democracy is all about. I mean, nobody. I don't think that anybody would expect the future government in Iran to do exactly the same thing that this or that country does.
Mm-hmm.
But as long as it may have its own even ambitions for making a further democratic government or society or whatever, as long as you believe in a simple fact that all human beings are free, they are born free, and they should be free, and they should have their free choice on everything.
Yeah.
Whether it's political, it's their social life,
Whether they want to be
private
doctor
life.
or they want to be a teacher
Yes.
or whatever it
Which
may be.
religion they want to believe in. I mean, these are obvious things that, you know, it gives you. This is the criteria by which you can judge whether this movement or this government is going to be a truly democratic one or not. But then, I mean, you can see in one of its items, it mentions that, you know, peaceful coexistence with its neighbors, Iran, and also with the rest of the world. We have nothing to fight with the West for. Why? Why should we?
Yeah.
We may have differences of beliefs. We may have things which we need to argue with each other.
Could be economic issues or trade issues or
yes,
things of that
yes,
nature, yeah.
Yes, but we have nothing to fight against the West.
Yeah.
You know, this is so. I don't know if that answers your
Yeah,
question.
it does. I just think that also that, you know, Iran's a fairly large country, and to open that market up to business,
Yeah.
I just think also, I think France is being very clever about what they're doing here, because once this and the regime will fall. I mean, it will fall. There will come a day it will fall. But there's a huge marketplace, and with the advent of the internet and social media and whatnot, there's going to be a lot of, I mean, in America as well, businesses can go in, and there's a lot of money to be made in infrastructure projects that need to be revamped in your country. And you're traditionally, or at least you used to be, a very wealthy country.
It still is.
Yeah.
And I think also, from a historical perspective, Kim, Iranian people have an affinity for the United States because, you know, you had General Lafayette fighting alongside George Washington to get rid of the British. We've had Americans who've gone to Iran at the time of the constitutional movement, including Baskerville, who's very famous, who fought alongside the rebels of that time in 1906. They called the Mujahideen of Tabriz, who ultimately conquered Tehran and brought about the constitutional government in Iran in 1906. And more than that, as you may know, under the Shah, a lot of Iranians came to the United States, got educated here, and so they have an understanding of, if you will, the international world, the modern way of life, all of the good things about this country, about Europe, about the Western way of life when it comes to individual freedoms, when it comes to social freedoms, when it comes to academic opportunities, when it comes to business opportunities. And Iran historically has always been a very secular country. In fact, the 1979 revolution wasn't so much about Islam and religion. It was about very specific social, political, and economic grievances that the Iranian people had against the Shah. It was such that Khomeini was at the right place at the right time in a vacuum of leadership. He stepped in and stole the revolution, the leadership of the revolution. And so in this sense, Iranians, of course, 95% are Muslim, but they don't want Islam to become the way of life in Iran, and that is why Mrs. Rajavi in her 10-point plan has underscored separation of religion and state. In fact, Iran will not have an official religion.
Will it be like something that Ataturk put
Not
in
even
place
that,
in
I
Turkey?
mean-
Is it?
I mean, Ataturk, I don't want to take a position on what he did,
Yeah.
but not so much like Ataturk. I think we're going to keep Iran to be Iranian.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be modeled after Western nations and culture. You know, Ataturk changed the Turkish language, the alphabet, everything
Yeah.
else. He sort of de-religionized Turkey. We're not going to do
Okay.
that at all. I think Iranians, whether they're Muslim, Jews, Christians, Baha'is, whatever, they can have their religion, but religion will not be the basis for either privilege or discrimination. In other words, if you're a Muslim, you do not have greater chance of having public office than if you're a Jew.
Yeah.
Conversely, if you're a Jew or if you're even a Baha'i, you will not be discriminated against if you want to run for public office. So theoretically speaking, any Iranian national with any religion, if he or she meets the test of the ballot box, can become Iranian president.
Sounds a little bit like Martin Luther King Jr. though.
You know, we've learned a lot from Martin Luther King. We've learned a lot from Martin Luther King Jr. He's very popular in Iran, as are other, you know, worldly leaders like Gandhi and other people who have fought for freedoms and things like
They
that.
have streets on their names.
See?
Yes. Yes,
And so in this sense, I think that, and I guess, you know, a lot of us are, at least people in our movement, many of them have lived a long time in Western countries, in Europe, in America, elsewhere. So in a sense, we have seen a lot of good things here that we would like to see.
Take back,
take back to Iran and allow our people to.
Many of the people I speak with say they want to go back, even though they've been here for 30 years, or in your case, 46 years. They want to go back. It's their country, and they're happy to be part of, you know, something that's changing in that part of the world. And you know, and as regarding the culture, and I mean, countries all have culture, and that's what makes a good country great.
Yes.
I mean that you can't erase your history.
It's
You
an
learn from
irony
it.
that
Yeah.
in the Middle East, if you would, the most, I guess if one can say, the most pro-Western nation in the whole of the Middle East is Iran.
Mm-hmm.
Because of this interaction that has been there for more than.
But you ask
100
10 people on the street here, 9 out of 10 of them wouldn't say that. They're like, "Oh my gosh, they want to kill us." That's changing the perspective and changing the minds of Americans. I think is crucial, especially at this
mix
stage.
Up the government.
Yeah, exactly.
With the regime, with the people.
Yeah, exactly.
They're
And I think
separate things.
yeah, and that
Completely separate.
yeah, and that's a message that needs to get out because, like I said, I mean, why not have Iran as an ally instead of an axis of evil? And I think it was a terrible label that was put on the country.
The big mistake that President Obama made was that he equated
The people.
the regime in Iran with the people of
The
Iran,
people, yes.
thinking that if he was nice to the mullahs, that the mullahs would be nice to America, which was completely wrong. They took that as a message of weakness on the part of the U.S. administration.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you know the billions that they gave to Iran after JCPOA.
I spoke to somebody who their money their family went to go get it, and it was gone.
It ended up in Syria and Lebanon and
Yeah.
Yemen and elsewhere. It didn't trickle down to the population. So, but let me also reiterate, you know, when we talk about, and when I talked to you yesterday about the timetable for overthrowing this regime, obviously it is our commitment to see to it that the mullahs will not see their 40th birthday. But naturally, that depends on a lot of factors.
Mm-hmm.
One of which is obviously what will the international community do?
Yeah.
because we now live in a small village. The world is a small village.
Yeah.
And so what the United States does, what the Europeans do, has a direct bearing on the situation inside Iran. When John Kerry walks with the Iranian foreign minister along Lake Geneva, that sends a terrible
it
message
doesn't look so good,
to the people of Iran, and obviously it emboldens the regime. On the other hand, when President Trump tweets, as he did, that he stands with the people of Iran, that sends a different signal. More than that, I think words
Actually, they reacted immediately.
Positively.
The
Yeah.
Iranians reacted positively.
Yeah, I heard, like, it's like you never hear this, but I mean, I saw a video, YouTube video that some of my sources have given me, and Viva Trump, Viva Trump. But the world here doesn't know, the Americans don't know this either. I mean, it's...
Fox News wrote, they talked to some people with Telegram, Eric Shawn did, with people in Iran, and they expressed their sentiment. Because, again, at the end of the day, what the United States does practically affects the situation on the ground in Iran. For example, if the US were to provide a free internet, easy access to social media, various apps to the people of Iran, and on the other hand, put limitations on Iran's the state communication systems, that would only empower the people of Iran. And if it were to cut off the Iranian regime from the international banking system, it would deny the regime the resources to bankroll its repressive forces, to continue the intervention in Syria, in Yemen, in Lebanon, and elsewhere. And so in that sense, it would weaken the regime, short of, as Mayor Giuliani said, sending the boots on the ground, enabling Iranians to do what they can do themselves. More than that, I think if the US government, as Mayor Giuliani said yesterday, says that its policy, official policy, is to see that the regime in Iran is changed to a democratic government, by the people of Iran, of course, and by the organized opposition, that will send a signal not only to the regime but also to its international partners. How has this regime survived for the past 39 years?
Yeah.
Obviously through brute force, but also because the international community, Europeans, President Obama, President Clinton, they gave it political legitimacy. They saw Iranian regime as a partner. And so that helped the mullahs solidify their power. To give you an example, in 1997, the Clinton administration designated the MEK as a terrorist group, and they said publicly this was a goodwill gesture to the newly elected president of Iran, Mohammad Khatami. Now, that designation had a dire impact on this opposition.
Nearly crippled you, huh?
It crippled, it delegitimized it. Its supporters were being hunted instead of regime terrorists being hunted. So you can clearly see that any policy that this administration adopts directly impacts the situation on the ground. And so we feel, quite frankly, that with our resources within Iran, with our organizational ability, with our very clear and concrete plan for the future of Iran, that all the pieces, if you will, of the puzzle are in place. But it will take, I think, also an effort on the part of the international community to recognize
to push you guys over the finish line.
Yeah, the Iranians have to be free just like other countries of the world. Remember, for example, South Africa, with all the
I used to live
that
there.
they had.
I covered the ANC uprisings 25 years ago.
Now, without direct international action, the crippling sanction against the apartheid regime and everything else that they did behind the scenes, that apartheid might still be in power in South Africa.
Let me ask you this on that front. Speaking of South Africa, I do know a lot about it. My daughter's actually half South African. Could you envision some sort of like truth commission happening in Iran where leaders or people in power, they come forward, they confess whatever they've done, and the new government says, okay, as long as you've confessed, we're not going to kill you and your family, type of thing. And that's what happened. That was like key to the success in South Africa, is they had that kind of a cleansing where everybody, you kind of, like in Ireland, it was the moms that said, I'm tired of losing my sons in battle and fighting against women. We kind of get tired of it. And we said, that's it, it's enough. And it was the fact that they were able to get forgiveness and say, okay, we did this and we're terribly sorry and we didn't know, or whatever the case may be. Is that something that Iran is considering?
Well, I think that, first of all, if you look at Mrs. Rajabi's platform, she says we will abolish the death penalty in Iran. So it means that in the future Iran, nobody will be executed. But I think I have seen Mrs. Rajabi speak to a lot of journalists in the past and the present. And one message and one theme that she constantly reiterates is our mission and our task for the future of Iran is not to seek vengeance. It is to bring hope and trust and love and eliminate hatred that this regime has created. And so I think in one of her speeches like 2 or 3 weeks ago, before a lot of young Iranians who've just come from Iran and they've joined our movement, there was a conference in Paris, she said that we're not going to go and arrest and detain every soldier, every Revolutionary Guard, every Basij member who has attacked the people and things like that. I think in the future Iran, there will be an opportunity for the leaders of this regime, despite all the crimes that they've committed, to face public trials with defense lawyers to defend themselves and explain to the people of Iran and to the world what they did, why they did it. And
are you thinking World Court or The
I
Hague,
don't know
or you
how
don't?
the details will work out, but we.
But something of an international nature.
Yes. Because that takes it out of your hands and kind of gets it to.
With journalists being present and everything. Because we will benefit from it.
And as to the details of it, obviously, we are not in a position to say that, like every other aspect of future policies of the future government of Iran, there will be, as I said, a free election, there will be a national legislative constituent assembly, which will draft a new constitution, and in that constitution, obviously the issue of the judicial system, justice, what it will do, all of that will be addressed. But I mean, from a historical perspective, we, as the MEK, they're Muslims, and our Prophet, Muhammad, has a very clear tradition for us. When he conquered Mecca, when he arrived, he declared the general amnesty. And despite the fact that up until his arrival in Mecca, his enemies were killing Muslims left and right. So I think seeking vengeance is not the way forward, but compassion and obviously the people who were directly committed, were involved in committing crime against humanity within Iran.
Yeah, they need to pay the price.
30,000. Naturally, they will face proper courts.
There'll be justice.
Just like in Nazi Germany, where you had the Nuremberg trial, and the heads of the Third Reich came and they sat on in a tribunal, and the indictment was read against them and they had a chance to defend themselves. Although, of course, at that time, a lot of them were hanged. Obviously, we have said there's no death penalty. And so in this sense, you know, Iran, from our perspective, has seen enough bloodshed
and hatred. Well, I mean, you lost a whole generation of young men to the war with Iraq. I mean, the back and forth with Saddam, it's like they ran out of men, so they started sending like goats, and I mean, it just, I mean, and it's just shocking that, you know, that war and the effect it has on people. And that, I mean, the one benefit I think are there's, you know, some negative things about the internet, but you know, the benefit is it's opened everybody's eyes up to see what's going on around the world, and you can actually see it for yourself and make those decisions. And I think the people in Iran, everybody, like I said, everybody I've talked to, they're just, you know, they're really humble, very, you know, giving, and very intelligent, bright people. And I think I told you yesterday, it was like the U.S. Census Bureau, you have a higher education level than the United States. So you've got a young, educated population. So I think that what's missing is the U.S. support. And do you foresee the State Department kind of at least opening their eyes to this a bit under Trump? And has Trump been a surprise for your movement?
No, I think, to be honest with you, what I can tell you is that, at least when it comes to our movement, the NCRI, the MEK, we believe in, actually that's the motto of Mrs. Rajavi, that says, to accomplish any task, to succeed in moving forward against any obstacle, you have to put in 1 million units of work. And so we have come a long way. As Mayor Giuliani said, that when this regime falls, a lot of pundits in Washington will say, well, how did this happen? Well, it's been 39 years of blood and sweat and toiling and hardship and pain and effort and sleepless nights. And, you know, we fought 15 years to get off the various terrorist lists in the US, in the UK, in the EU. These were very difficult times for us. We put in a lot of effort to ensure the safety and security of our sisters and brothers in Camp Ashraf. We had 1,000 days of sitting outside the State Department. We had a 72-day hunger strike right here, across the street, outside the White House, in 2009. 72 days we were here. And my office was it used to be called Caribou, that cafe, coffee shop on the corner of 17th and Pennsylvania, because we didn't have an office. So I used to sit there. And they had been wired. Honestly, I was there 72 days, from 8 a.m. until 6 p.m. I was sitting in that cafe, trying to reach out to people and bring media to write about the hunger strike. So we think that the onus is upon us and our generation to bring about this change. We have paid a heavy price, and we will continue to pay that price, because we really believe that Iran can and must be free and democratic. Now, along the way, obviously, where the United States stands can expedite or can retard this inevitable march to freedom in Iran. During the Clinton administration, it severely hampered it. The Obama administration, because of all the concessions it gave to the regime, his silence in 2009, you saw that uprising be quashed by the regime. With this administration, we hope and expect that the U.S. government stands with the people of Iran and takes concrete action, and we hope that the State Department and I guess, professional staff, the bureaucrats in the State Department, see the light of the day, which is that this regime will fall. As Mayor Giuliani said, this regime is not inevitable. It has
Yeah.
to go, and it will go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As Gandhi said, sometimes tyrannies seem invincible, but at the end of the day, they will not survive.
Mhm.
So we think we are confident of ourselves and our chances, and we will do what we can do within our power to bring change to Iran, and as we have done in the past, and we hope that the U.S. administration sides with us and with our efforts to bring that change sooner, because I think every hour that this regime is overthrown sooner, we will have less bloodshed, not only in Iran, but
Yeah.
also in the rest of the region. Look at the very, horrific and heart-wrenching videos you see in Syria, and all these little children being wiped out. And, it's like
Yeah.
the future of Syria is being destroyed by this criminal regime in Syria.
Yeah, like 10 years ago, it was a secular country that protected Christians and Jews and Muslims. And they were, I just, for the life of me, can't understand why the Obama administration let that go.
Yes, and so in this sense, we have been around quite a long time, and
One of the oldest.
are we
I think
one?
Oman is it Oman? I think might be a little older than you.
Who?
Oman. Is it as far as the country? I think Iran's one of the oldest countries.
Yeah, yeah,
Oman, I think
Oman.
I think Oman might be just a little bit longer. Obviously, it's a irrelevant country. It's nothing there, but
Yes.
I think memory serves.
Before we were on the defensive, both in terms of the terrorist designation, but also the situation of our people in Camp Ashraf and in Camp Liberty and in Iraq. But now we are on the offensive, and we will do what we can do, and
You're preparing your people there.
yeah, see
That's what you're
yeah,
doing.
Yeah, and see what can be done, because as you said, Iranian people are highly educated, they are quite enlightened, they are fed up with the clerics. It's amazing that now people are writing graffitis on the wall, death to Khamenei, and then taking selfies and sending it abroad. And they don't want this regime. They just, this regime is an aberration in the long and storied history of Iran.
Yeah.
And it will fall. Hopefully, we're working toward making it happen before the regime reaches its 40th birthday. But even if that does not happen, we will continue to work, because we are a generation that saw the fall of the Shah, and we owe it to our people to make sure that they can also breathe the fresh air of democracy and
for the
freedom for the future.
children, so they
Yes.
can grow up free and conquer whatever goals they decide they want
Yes.
to conquer. So let me just get back to the State Department real
Yeah.
quick. Have you guys been meeting with the State Department at all, or have they just kind of stayed out of it altogether, or?
Well, I think what I can say, without wanting to get into a lot of details, obviously, is that the U.S. government is aware of where we stand on a lot of issues,
Okay.
and I would prefer to keep it at that. Don't go beyond it.
Okay.
But they are aware of who we are, what we stand for, and of course we're only, 300 meters from the White House.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they know we are here.
Yeah, well, or maybe at least the NSA knows you're here. Yeah.
And a lot of former State Department officials on our side, a lot of the president's friends like Mayor Giuliani and Gingrich and others know who we are, and so I'm sure that.
So I would say that you're building momentum. Would you say that you're building momentum here in the U.S. with getting the word out about, what you are attempting to do? Hopefully successfully, but I think that you're starting to gain momentum, in my opinion. I'm seeing a little more coverage, although not a lot. And I have to fight and beg and do everything with my TV people just to get these stories out. And I wrote about Syria like a full year before it happened, and we did TV on it and that. And I'm like, we need to be in front of this Iran story. This is going to be the story. Why aren't we the ones that are out front? Because nobody else wants to pick it up and talk about it. But I think also the movement, and what I've seen is it's so many women are driving this. That's also an inspirational, and you're not using weapons to drive this, and that's what makes this special. And with support on this side of the ocean, I think things could move along a little quicker. And like I continue to say, I mean, why not turn the axis of evil into our ally? There's nothing, that's peace.
Yes. Have you seen, like, by the way, the footage of our annual event in Paris?
No, I haven't watched it.
Let me just show you a short one, just to give you an example of when we talk about
of the young people and women,
that,
girls.
But also, and interestingly, you mentioned women. I think one of the striking features of our movement is that it is being led by women, and not just Mrs. Rajabi, but a whole bevy of women, a generation of women who have taken on the leadership role.
No offense, but I think we are smarter. And we know how to multitask. Yeah, but that's to me, that's also
the future. Kim, I can tell you that we have a valuable asset in our pocket for building of many things which Iran needs after the removal of this regime. And that asset comes from the history of our past almost 4 decades battle against this regime. Women's hegemony is one of them. But this has been the result of a very hard education by Mrs. Rajabi herself, because it's not so simple, you know that. You cannot just come and say it in word that, okay, from tomorrow we'll have equality between men and women. Well, for men to accept it, and for even women themselves to believe in it, it's a hard task.
Well, it's a generational change is what it is. It takes a generation to...
And really, I can tell you that she has personally spent thousands of hours for educating men and women in our movement to learn this and to practice it and come across, overcome the problems which arises. So it's not a simple things, and that is why in every single thing which you imagine, and you just said about our terrorist designation and the battle which we had, the very first decision to make, to actually take a legal action against this and enter into a legal battle was a very difficult decision to make, which was made by herself. Even people within our movement could not be so sure that this is the right decision, because you don't know how will the judiciary will act in the UK or in the EU or in the United States, whether they would act independently or they will be supervised by their governments to make the wrong decision. You didn't know. I mean, when she made that decision, everything was dark. Even people inside our movement were not encouraging her to do so. But she made that decision and said one thing, that no matter what the result, we need to do that for history, to get it registered in the history, so that it will remain in the history that MEK and this movement was not a terrorist movement, and it did not accept to be designated as one. So this was the main reason that she made this decision. So every single thing that we had in our movement of struggle against this regime has brought a lot of asset into our pocket.
Mm-hmm.
And that is why we feel that, we can build Iran. And I remember many journalists or other people have asked Ms. Rajavi on different occasions that if you go to Iran and people do not vote for the NCRI or MEK, what will happen? And she says, okay, we remain as opposition. As long as we have the chances to act freely and have our political freedom to have our party, our assemblies, our publications and everything, that's fair enough, because we never started our struggle against this regime for power. So
it was for
if
freedoms.
people don't want, they don't vote.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's very compelling.
Yeah, this is last year in Paris.
This looks like it looks like the conventions I go to.
It is actually.
Yeah, it's a big
convention.
Yeah.
It's driving rain.
Saturday, July 1st, Paris was the scene of the grand gathering of Iranians and supporters of the Iranian resistance. They were joined by thousands of prominent politicians, statesmen, luminaries, and legislative delegations from over 50 countries from 5 continents. Mrs. Mariam Rajavi, President-elect of the National Council of Resistance of Iran, was the keynote speaker.
آفتاب تغییر بر ایران تابیده است. رژیم حاکم بیش از همیشه آشفته و ناتوان است. جامعه ایران لبریز نارضایتی است و جامعه بین‌المللی سرانجام به این واقعیت نزدیک شده که مماشات با این رژیم خطاست. همین اوضاع جوشان 3 حقیقت اساسی را برای رسیدن به آزادی ایران و صلح و آرامش در منطقه بیان می‌کند. اول، ضرورت سرنگونی رژیم ملت فقیر. دوم، در دسترس بودن سرنگونی رژیم. و سوم، وجود یک آلترناتیو دموکراتیک و مقاومت سازمان یافته برای به زیر کشیدن استبداد مذهبی. ما از مواضع کنفرانس سران عربی اسلامی و آمریکا در ریاض علیه اقدامات تروریستی رژیم ایران استقبال کردیم. در این حال تاکید می‌کنیم که راه حل بحران منطقه و مقابله با گروه‌های مانند داعش در سرنگونی این رژیم به دست مردم و مقاومت ایران است.
The government of the United States supports you. We're behind you. We agree with your values. The government of the United States understands the danger of Iran. The government of the United States will not allow Iran to become an empire in the Middle East. And the United States of America will not allow Iran to become a nuclear power under any circumstances. The regime is evil and it must go. Free Iran! We have an alternative. Not only do we have regime change, but we have an alternative, and that alternative is you. It's a democratic alternative. It's a force for change. It's well organized. It has popular support, and it has a vast network of supporters. You know your own people better than I do, and you know that's what's in their heart. And it's the murder and the oppression of the government that is stopping that from happening. And we have to break that loose. And supporting the MEK is one of the reasons and one of the ways to break that loose under the leadership of a great hero, Madam Rajavi.
Containment is appeasement, and appeasement is surrender. The only practical goal is to support a movement to free Iran. Any other goal will leave the dictatorship finding ways to get around any agreement and to lie about everything.
And I have introduced legislation in the House of Representatives to designate the IRGC as a terrorist entity. And we will get that done. I can assure you.
The IRGC must be eviscerated. I thank Congressman Poe, Congressman McCall, my colleagues, for the IRGC terror designation bill. The IRGC controls the entire black market economy. They control a huge percentage of the entire economy. So I will say this, not specifically to the people of Iran gathered here today, but to the leaders from around the world. It is time for us to ask the world community if they would rather do business with the United States or with the IRGC.
The United States Congress supports the freedom-loving people of Iran. We stand with you, we work for you, we pray for you. God bless you. Free Iran!
And now, the next step is to free Iran. And you all know down deep that regime change is up to the people of Iran. And that means you. That means the people who are in Albania. That means Iranian dissidents all around the globe. That means Iranian dissidents in Iran, in Tehran, and in all the different cities. But the United States has to stand firm and stand behind this movement. And I believe we will.
The capital since 1979 of Islamist extremism and terrorism has been in Tehran under this extremist regime, and that is why it's got to go. In the past year, as you know, there is a social movement that has adopted the cause of bringing to light what happened to the 30,000 Iranians, mostly members of the MEK, who were massacred in 1988. To hold Madame Rajavi's picture up in public places is a sign of the unrest of the people and the growing confidence of the people that change is near. It is time for America and hopefully some of our allies in Europe to give whatever support we can to those who are fighting for freedom within Iran.
There were 89 speakers from different 5 continents. About 600 parliamentarians, political personalities would come to take part in this event. And so, you know,
so she briefly touched on the ISIS and the terrorism aspect.
Actually, her speech was like about 35 minutes.
That was a tiny little touch, but I mean, once the regime is gone, will it just be a military directive essentially that says, okay, we're not going to support, if you're in Yemen, you need to come home and be part of our country, or don't come back at all, we won't support you, you're not going to get your bills paid for. Is that simply what's going to happen, and will it be a directive?
All of the, I think every person who's now involved in some sort of intervention in various countries around Iran or anywhere else, they will have to get out and come back. The future foreign policy of the, at least NCRI, if as Elaheh has said, the people voted in office, is non-intervention in any part of the world. And we're going to rebuild. I think there has to be a tremendous effort undertaken to rebuild Iran from ground up, because the mullahs have ruined it. And you know, the problems it had with the environment, with its economy.
You guys suffered a drought not too long ago either.
Yes, the greatest salt lake in the world, in Oromia, North fortress Iran is now 95% dry. There's no water. The pollution and the sandstorms in the south of Iran, in Ahvaz and Khorramshahr, people can't breathe anymore. So I think we have a monumental task of rebuilding Iran before us. And I think the most daunting would be to bring back the love and trust and faith of Iranians to each other. Because this, Khomeini came, committed a lot of crimes in Iran, and the mullahs have. But you know what their biggest crime was? Not that massacring 30,000 political prisoners in 1988 wasn't a big crime. Not that executing 120,000 people was not a big crime. Not that wasting Iranian people's wealth and resources in foreign wars and intervention was not a big crime. Not that killing a foreign national was not a big crime. But the biggest crime that Khomeini and the mullahs have committed is to betray the trust and dash the hopes of the Iranian people. And I think our number one task, as Mrs. Rajavi has said many times, is to restore that trust and that hope. Because once your trust is betrayed, then everything is lost. And so that's, I think, very important task. I think we have to bring smiles to the faces of the Iranian people. We have to bring love to their hearts again. Things that this regime has totally destroyed. And I think once that happens, I think you will see Iran quickly, as you said, become, if you will, a harbinger of peace, of friendship, of fraternity, of equality.
A leader in the region.
And I think all of the countries will be affected by it.
Well, I truly think that's why Saudi Arabia is making changes in their political structure, because they're seeing what's going on here and they want to be the rulers of the region. And that's why I think we're seeing a lot of the changes in Iran. I think I disagree a little bit with Rudy Giuliani on that front, but I just, that again, this is something that will give opportunity to millions of people, and educated people, and a people that have a lot in common with the West and with the United States, I believe. So, and it's great that
it will be quickly built. That this we really believe in, because no matter how devastated and ruined is the country, if people see that they're respected and they are given the opportunity to participate in building the country, then things will change rapidly. Because I remember one of the journalists once asked Mrs. Rajavi, well, you're saying yourself that the country is completely ruined. So how are you going to build this completely ruined country? And this is a very difficult task. And how are you going to manage this? And she said, by mobilizing the people. We have our people. So they can do the job. But if you give them the right to do this, and Iranian people have been ignored and severely exploited for all these 40 years. So if they are given the chance and the rights to work, they will do the best work. I mean, this is something that we can see in them. Look what's happening these days. I mean, building all these slogans, nobody is, okay, they can, they get the inspiration from the movement, but nobody is dictating to them what to cry out. But they target they choose the right target, and they do it. And they are, in the way that they are fighting back the regime, it's really amazing. They find the ways how they can actually damage the regime when they want to repress them.